Old Tom Gray here. Made me a sheet metal box from my old Skilsaw 77. Made it out of 18 gauge steel with no overlap joints. Everything's welded. I finished it with a rust patina and a coat of tung oil. It's got room for my big old 77, a pocket for spare blades, and a pocket for the cord. I'll show you how I made it. Don't have a proper box for my beloved old Skilsaw 77. Ashamed to say I keep it in a plastic toolbox, so I'm gonna remedy that. I'm gonna make one out of sheet metal. So I'm gonna say it needs to be 21 long by 8 wide. Let's see, 8 plus 3, 11 tall. So it's 18 gauge sheet. It's an offcut. I'm gonna guess 23 by 35, 36. So I'm going to make this box so it only requires 4 folds in the sheet metal. And I think this is enough to do half of it. I might have to go get another sheet. Time for some quick cardboard engineering. In this case, it's corrugated cardboard. So might want to get you a scrap of that. And this design is what's called a clamshell. So the upper part of the box and the lower part of the box are both full height, full length, full width. And the difference is that the upper part is folded on the short legs and the base or the bottom is folded on the long legs. That's how you get away with 4 folds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Doing a little development on our corrugated cardboard design. To make the top piece, I need to add the length plus the height plus the height. So that's 43. And then make it 8 inches wide for the overall width. So I need a piece 43 by 8. And for the bottom, I need to add the height plus the width plus the height. So that comes out to 30. And then make it the full length, which is 21. So that piece has to be 30 by 21. Welcome to the latest in metal cutting technology. It's called a table saw. And I've got this one fitted with a steel cutting blade. The Diablo Steel Demon. And I've put a special guide on the rip fence, which is just a piece of 16 gauge steel, and it runs tight to the table. The reason for that is because this fence doesn't go all the way to the table. You don't want the sheet metal sliding underneath it. So it's just a 3-inch wide piece of 16 gauge. And I'm just going to rip this to 8 inches wide, just like I would with a piece of plywood. Word of warning, these metal cutting blades are fantastic, but they throw chips, not sawdust. So suit up. made up a example template out of a narrow piece of sheet metal for the base. That is the right width and height. And I'm going to use that to adjust the sheet in my brake so that I get the same two bends in the right spacing. So you can do this in a normal brake too. Just use a template to size the back edge of your sheet before you clamp everything down. Looking down the barrel here, it's probably hard to tell with all the glare and everything, but here's the base that I just folded up. The top and sides actually fit inside of this, so I gotta bend the top a little bit short of the overall length so that it rides inside of here for welding. So I just simply set the base on there, drew two lines, and I'm going to fold the sides up, but a little bit short. So there's the two pieces put together, the two halves, if you will. I left this side long when I did the cutting, and you can see it doesn't exactly fit. So I'm going to cut this end off and round the corners so that it nests inside of the bend radius on both ends, top and bottom, and just do some fitting and grinding and a little bit of cutting to get these two to nest just righteous. Also, when I do that, I'm going to leave actually a little bit of a radius on the bottom of the sides here that are going to put a little teeny weeny bit of a dish into the bottom of the box. That'll keep it from oil canning, just a slight crown. I'm going to put feet on it later so it won't rock on the bottom. Got the side panel inside of the box. It's in between the front and the back, just the end of it sticking out. And I got it clamped in there with my made in Dubuque, Iowa, believe it or not, universal clamp. Now I'm just going to scribe the bottom there. And I'll just grind that. Maybe you can see the little bitty crown that I'm going to put in it. Now is the time to spend a little time fitting up the edges and filing them, and I finish them with my little deburring tool. It's the last time you're going to see these for a while. Make sure that the sides of the box reach all the way down to the bench surface so that I got plenty of weld area when I start putting this together. Made me up a little dimple die out of some hardware store angle brackets. These are the things that they sell you for joining wood together. Big honking 1-inch washer and a nut, and it all hangs on my vise. I just tacked it all together. You just stick the piece of sheet metal in here and crimp it on down, and this is my test piece, and you end up with dimples. So I'm going to put 4 of these in the bottom of the box before I start welding so that the box doesn't rock. And there they are, 4 dimpled feet. This one's a little eccentric, but that's okay. I'll live with it. It was my first one. Okay, so now before I go any further, I'm going to take a face-off disc and clean up the inside before I weld it together so that it's easier to paint. I don't have to reach inside to sand it. To get everything aligned, I set it on the workmate on a couple of pieces of 1/4-inch plate so that the little dogs on the workmate can control the front and back. And then I used a bunch of tape and shipping staples to get the centers aligned between the side and the bottom. So I'm going to start welding there and go outwards. And then I'll go on the other side and do the same thing. Now that that first tack is in place, I'm just going to go from here outward, going to the place that has the next best fit up, the next best fit up, and just tacking every place where there's a good fit up. Here's a little trick for you. You need to create space in sheet metal welds. Just common paper clips in the seam that you want to preserve work great. You can also use them for filler rod. Got the bottoms tacked about once every inch or so. Just letting it cool. It's still warm. It feels good on my old bones, but I just tacked it every inch or so, 3/4 of an inch, whatever. And let this cool. It's a slow process. I could have got my MIG welder out and zip, 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 but you still got to watch the heat. And you pay for it later on with MIG welding because it's harder to grind. So just take your time, tack, tack, tack. Go to the point with the next best fit up, tack that. Move the point you want to improve the fit up. Close the joint, tack that. Now that I started tacking up the sides, now's the time to get it square and let it cool off. So I'm letting it cool naturally to the touch. And while it's cooling, if you want to tighten up joints, one of the other beauty parts about gas welding is you can, while the weld is still hot, you can hammer the joints, hammer welding, and you can tighten them up quite a bit. To weld the top and sides, I pulled the top up and shoved a couple scraps of 16 gauge to act as splints to keep the top from drawing down as I heat it. So I'm going to just be clamping, tacking, clamping, tacking. There it is, all tacked together. Still warm. So I'm going to let this cool off naturally, just in the ambient air. And then I'm going to finish weld all the seams. And then we'll separate the lid from the box. There it is, all finished welded. Got her clamped down so as she cools off, it doesn't deform too badly. And I welded it all the way around, except for down here where it pulled in on me a little bit. Plus, I don't want to completely seal it up. I want to leave it ventilated a little bit, so I'll hammer that out and weld it up after I separate the top and the base. So I just took my time, half inch at a time, half inch at a time, half inch at a time, go back. This is a slow process, but you go too fast, you're just going to heat it up and it's just going to warp all over the place. Weapon of choice here is a good old 7-inch Milwaukee angle grinder with a 24 grit disc. For now, this is all the grinding I'm going to do, just knocking the welds down. And as my old man used to say, make sure you're looking at what you're looking at. So we don't want to overdo this right now, because after we separate the lid from the base, then I'll do all the touch-ups and final finishing and final sanding. So right now I'm just going to knock these sharp corners off with some 80 grit. All I did here is I smoothed it off on this surface and on this surface with the sanding disc. Now I'm just going to... Lots of ways to do this, but I'm going to use an angle grinder. And I just scribed the line at 1.5 inches from the top, or drew a line with a Sharpie, clamped this piece of angle iron to it, and I'm just going to use that as a guide to separate the lid. Before I go too much further, I'm going to locate the handle, the holes for the handle, so that I can add reinforcements underneath. There's the handle preliminary, just finger tight it on there. I'm going to make some reinforcements. Time for some cereal box engineering. Looks like post grape nuts. So the top has a little bit of a crown in it to make it strong. So to reinforce that, I'm going to put a couple of stringers in right by the handle screws, so that if you sit on the box or lay something on top of it, it won't cave in the top of the box. So I just cut these pieces out with just a little bit of a radius on the top edge of them. Let me find a piece of scrap I can make these from. Here's a piece of bent up rusty junk that I found on the railroad tracks near my house. It gauges up to be 18 gauge. So minus the rust, it'll probably turn into 19 gauge after I knock this rust off it, but hey, that's good enough. Here's my patterns laid out on that rusty piece of whatever it is. So that was a failure. I don't know what this stuff is, but it cracked when I folded it pretty badly. And then this ear just cracked right off when I folded it. So not using that. Let me try this other piece of mangled junk that I found on the railroad tracks. Well, that worked a whole lot better. Now I'm just going to trim this up and clean it up and deburr it. Thank you, old Black & Decker. There they are. I just plug welded them in with my MIG welder. Wanted to get good penetration without building a lot of heat, so I used MIG. And now this lid is hell for stout. I mean, that thing is, you could stand on that. Using my edge of the bench, the edge of my bench here as a platform. Need 2 3/4 inches clear between the table and the bottom of the blade guard. So I need a platform inside the box that's 2 3/4 or slightly higher. Looking into the belly of the beast here, I got a block of wood that's 3 inches tall, simulating a platform that we got to make. Oh, that fits nice. Okay, so we need a sheet metal platform under the table of the saw, 3 inches tall or slightly less. It's a little shelf that spans the box for the front of the saw. Look like that. Let me make one of these to hold the back of the saw. Scribed a line on each side, about a 1/2 inch from the edge to fold up, and on this side, fold down on this side. But this is 16 gauge, which my brake can't handle 16 gauge. But the big Wilton and my old Bell cross peen hammer, they've got a different idea. Back on top here, so I got big brother and little brother, and they're going to span the box. And then I got these 2 little angle pieces I bent up that are going to hold the saw table in this space and kind of project up from the below there. But I also want to keep the blades in here, so I'm going to make a little pocket in this corner for the blades. All right, I've got them propped up on a couple of pieces of dirty plywood, and there's some 1, 2, 3 blocks under here. In position. So the saw fits in just like that. That looks just about righteous. So there's the blade pocket, which is just a piece of 16 gauge, about yay wide, right oriented at the center of the blades. There's all the rough cut and folded interior pieces. So now I'm going to take all these and grind the edges and knock all the burrs off and clean up the corners and round them off and make them nice and smooth. Here's all the interior pieces all sanded and smoothed out. And I welded the blade pocket to the rear shelf because they're going to go in as a unit. Now I'm going to place them, and then I'm going to drill through the outside of the box so that I can spot weld these in place from the outside. But I'm going to take my automatic center punch, and right where I traced all of the outlines of the interior pieces, I'm just going to turn this thing up to heavy and then center punch from the outside, or from the inside. This is going to be impossible to see, but the automatic center punch leaves little dimples in the outside of the box, and you just take a regular punch, find the little dimples, and set them from the outside. Now you can drill easily from the outside. Now that all the holes are drilled for all the plug welding, I'm going to paint the inside of the box, the bottom. I'm going to paint all of these interior components, top and bottom, so everything's covered before I do final assembly and welding and mount the lid. Just using a face-off disc. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to place the interior pieces gingerly inside the box and mark their locations by the spot weld holes. So I'll clean the paint off of those locations and then spot weld them through. Now I know this interior is going to get all scratched up and weld burned and everything else. That's fine. But I just wanted to make sure I had the undersides and the interiors of everything painted and coated so I don't have to reach around and get on spring on weird angles to coat the inside. So I'll have to touch it up, that's fine. To actually clean the paint off, I'm just going to use a Dremel with a little wire brush on it. Just like that. Just removes. Alrighty. Saw fits righteous. Spare blades fit righteous. Okay, I'm going to go around and finish welding all these spot welds. Next step is to mount the hinge. So for that, it's just a piano hinge. I'm going to center it over the back with the leaves on the inside, and then simply fold it over and mark 3 holes. And I'll just mount it with 3 screws for now until I get everything all set up. And then okay, now I'm going to mount the lid. To locate the lid, I'm just going to pick the center barrel here, center of the barrel here, and just give a mark right over the center of these 2 parts of the barrel here, segments of the barrel, and transfer that mark to the inside. Like so. And then I'll locate the hinge to that and drill this and screw it to the upper leaf of the hinge. Made a goof here. When I attached these reinforcements, I did not account for the width of the hinge there. But that's easily solved. I'm just going to cut 2 little slots out of the hinge to allow for these reinforcements. Okay, so here's the lid installed with just a few screws. Working good. And now here's where we need to fit the lid up. So going around the front. Now I'm going to dress this edge to make this straight to make the lid and the box match. When I cut this with the angle grinder, I used a straight edge, but it's not perfect. So weapons of choice now are just a straight edge and a flat file. And I'm just gonna dress the edge like that over and over again, just like hand planing a piece of wood, to get this edge straight as I can get it, so that I can then match it to the lid. I can see I'm a little low on the end over there. A little low on that end and a little low on that end. So I'm gonna knock some of the middle out of it here. I know this looks like drudgery, but get a good sharp file and use the double cut side. And this is just a hardware store file. It's nothing special. You'd be surprised how quick it goes. And that looks just about righteous. Maybe a little more right there. Deburr that real quick. Okay. Looks like the lid is high in the middle. And this is bellied out a little bit. I'm going to determine how much meat I got to take off the top. I kind of push the top inside the bottom a little bit, so I just force it in there. And I'm just going to scribe a line on the top. It's going to be really hard to see, but right there. And I'm just going to file down to that line with the flat file. All right, that looks just about righteous. A little bit more to go there, but I'm going to wait till I get the top reinforcement done before I fix that. So it turns out I obviously warped it because it's bellied out here about, I don't know, 1/16 of an inch. But I'm going to use that to help index the top when it's closed. So you always need something to index the top to the bottom so they don't walk across each other. And I'm going to use the tension from this slight warpage to do that against the inside of the lid. Probably not real clear what I mean, but you'll see. I'll do it and show you what I mean. Next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to reinforce the top of the lower box. Let me see what I can figure out for that. Extreme close-up here. You can see the hinge looking down the end of the box. And see how the hinge sticks out proud of the surface. And this hinge barrel is about 3/16 in diameter. So I'm going to reinforce the lower box with a piece of 3/16 round bar. And I mocked it up with a piece of threaded rod, number 10 threaded rod, which is about 3/16 in diameter, and a piece of 16 gauge sheet. That is going to form the lip that retains the bottom of the box to keep the bottom and the top from becoming misaligned. and the threaded rod simulates the 3/16 round bar. So I'm going to weld a piece of 3/16 round bar all the way around both sides in the front and attach it to a leaf of 18 gauge that's going to provide the lip for the top to register on. Handheld shot here. So here's my 3/16 round bar. This is the upper edge of the lower box. And I put in a piece of 18 gauge, 1 inch wide strap. And I'm going to weld this round bar to the strap and the box simultaneously by means of these holes. So coming around back, or the inside, you can see the little holes that I drilled. Those bridge the round bar and the box. Kind of hard to do this with one hand, but I think you get the idea. So I'm gonna start plug welding these all the way across the top and sides, or the front and sides. To keep things tracking straight, I just have a piece of 1/4 inch scrap here that I'm gonna gauge above the sheet metal above the round bar all the way across as I go. That makes sure I have a 1/4 inch of registry between the base and the top. So when the top closes, it'll grab that lip and will be stopped by the round bar. I'm just cooling off the welds with this little cheap blowgun. There it is with the 3/16 round bar welting. It's all around the front and sides and then the hinge barrel in the back, so it gives it a nice shadow line all the way around it. So next is a heck of a lot of grinding. So I got to do all the finish grinding on all the welds, all the sanding, all the smoothing, knock down these plug welds. So I'll be back at you when that's all done. There's the repainted interior, cover up all the sanding marks and scratches that I put into it. Here's the interior of the lid. Probably kind of hard to see in this glare. Outside is still unfinished. So now I'm going to assemble it and then rust the outside. There she is, all assembled. And this thing is hell for stout. It's really strong. It does an oil can. It doesn't twist. You could stand on that. You could jump on that. Okay, let's rust it up. Step 1 of the rusting process is a good healthy cleaning. I'm just degreasing with acetone and a coffee filter. Step 2 of the rusting is to take some muriatic acid. And I'm just going to sponge it on, so I'm just going to wet this sponge and dab it on. Like so. And this stuff's nasty. I mean, it's really nasty, so make sure you do this outdoors. And once that's on, I'm going to take a spray bottle full of just drugstore hydrogen peroxide, just regular spray bottle. Put it on superfine mist, and then just fog it start rusting right before your very eyes. And when she gets going, you can add a little color or texture to it just by sprinkling a little more peroxide wherever you want it, and let it sit some more, and it'll develop layers. You can get pretty creative with it if you want. Don't pick your nose or rub your eyes when you're doing this. Stuff's acid and it's pretty nasty. So, important note here, once you get it rusted, don't hit it again with the muriatic. It'll just wipe the rust off and you'll have to start all over. So one and done on the muriatic. Now that looks like a toolbox with a past. So it's all dried. It's a couple hours later. I dribbled some peroxide on top to kind of simulate raindrops, like it had been left out in the rain. Looks like it's been sitting in a puddle. If you've seen old toolboxes before, you know they get pretty beat up. So just to finish this off now, I'm just going to rub over it with my hands to smooth everything out. And then I'm going to coat it with just tung oil right from the hardware store. And I'm going to dab that on with a coffee filter. And there it is. Skilsaw's in. Blades are in. Cord fits nicely. She's ready for action. Well, that's a success. That was a lot of fun. I'm going to put this baby in action now. I built this thing to be used. So I'm going to leave this one here. And it's on to the next project. I will see you there and then.